Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and on this episode I spoke with writer and comedian Candace Bryan. We talk about her upcoming fringe show MILF, Mom I'd Like to Find, moving from a coward's hour in 2023 to debuting with a full show this year, her decisions behind venue choice and ticket price, as well as her experiences in roast battles, and how her work in progress shows have helped shape the show. I started by asking Candace to give a brief introduction.
My name's Candace Bryan, and I am a writer and comedian based in London, originally from the US, as you can probably tell from my accent. Most recently, I'm working on my debut show for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival called MILF, Mom I'd Like to Find, which is going to be kind of a mix of stand-up and storytelling.
So it's middle of May as we speak. You've already done 3 work in progresses at Brighton. I think you've got 1 left to go. I mean, how's that been going so far?
It has been really fun. It's my first time doing a show at Brighton Fringe. I've been as a punter before, so I know it's a good vibe. I love Brighton this time of year. It's getting warm and amazing. I've done a few work in progress shows in London, sort of since November, kind of leading up. So it's been fun. This is like sort of me taking out the whip, kind of with the mind of like, I feel like it's sort of finished. I'm not working on it as much as I was in November. So it's been fun to see kind of how it is landing, how it's resonating. I do joke with my friends. I feel like my target audience is people who live in Brighton because I'm kind of like a hipster East London girly. So it really lands there. But yeah, it's been fun. I'll say like I've only done a show in Edinburgh before, and Brighton is really different than that. So it's been a bit more challenging than I expected, but the shows that I've done have been really fun.
And so across the 3, do you feel, I mean, you're saying you feel it's kind of nearly there already, but do you feel much change between show 1 and show 3?
Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, the first time I took the show to Brighton, it was my first time being completely off notes because, when I'm doing my whips in London, I might have my notes on stage and kind of glance at them or, the classic comedian thing of, what do I want to talk about next? Trying to buy time while you remember the next thing you want to talk about. So, the first time in Brighton, I was kind of so in my head, like, am I going to remember everything? Whereas the show I did last weekend, I felt more kind of at ease, more relaxed, feel like I really knew it. But also, I'm a writer. I'm always making tweaks. Like I thought of a joke on Wednesday, I'm going to put in the show on Sunday, kind of things like that. It's always evolving, but it's like the structure I feel is there, but I'll be making tweaks up until July 31st when I head to Edinburgh.
Speaking to a few people who are already prepping for the show, it feels like you're further down the line on a lot of them. You said you kind of started in November. Does the show as a concept start as, from day one, you think this is kind of the thing I want to talk about, or are there bits and pieces and then you put a structure around them?
That's a great question. So part of the reason I think I'm so ahead is that originally I wanted to do Edinburgh 2024, but I had kind of a complicated year with some visa issues and I had to go to Paris for a few months. So it just didn't make sense. So I've kind of had more, runway to kind of develop the concept. I think I'm very much like a conceptual person, and then I go to the jokes because it's easier for me as an artist to sort of put limitations. Otherwise, I'm like, I could write jokes about literally anything. Whereas if I have a story I want to tell or concepts I want to explore, it kind of narrows down when I'm sitting in my room brainstorming joke ideas, like what the topics are going to be. But I think with this show, it is my debut show, and I did have sort of this idea to kind of talk about my background. And that's naturally, even when I started doing stand-up without having a show in mind, that's naturally kind of what I was already talking about. And I did a 45-minute whip in 2023 Edinburgh. So this is it's very different than that show, but there are some similar jokes and similar themes that I've been sort of working on throughout that time, if that makes sense.
And you were saying you kind of did a show before, had someone on a couple of years ago, they kind of call it Coward's Hour, which seems really unfair really hard on yourself to kind of say, 45 minutes is still a long old time to kind of put together. I mean, how was your experience of Edinburgh that time?
For me, it was less of a coward's hour. And even though I think that phrase is hilarious, I really only started doing comedy in 2022. So even to do a 45 in August 2023 was very ambitious. But to be honest, like I knew because I was on a student visa at the time, I knew that it was going to be expiring and I wanted to kind of make a go for the global talent visa, like the artist visa. And to do that as a comedian, you have to have done shows, gotten some write ups. You have to show that you're not just like doing club spots, or open mics all the time. So I kind of had this motivation. So I knew what my goals were going into it. I wasn't trying to become famous or, people have these really high expectations going into Edinburgh. I was like, I just need to do a show. I also know that eventually I want to do a debut hour. So I kind of want to go there and learn about the flow of energy, what the different venues are. And I also just wanted to see a bunch of shows. So I was there for the whole month. And for me, it was a really positive experience because my expectations were really limited and my goals were really specific. So I remember by the end of the festival, obviously you're really exhausted, but I was like, I wish this could be my whole life where I could just like, be on stage for an hour every day. So it was really fun in that way, but it's incredibly taxing. So I'm really glad I was sort of forced to take a year off because now I'm going into it really, really excited again.
I think a lot more people I speak to do these 2-year cycles because I think to kind of write, put together, and just it's probably a 12-month process as it is. So if you're doing that every year, that would be your life almost.
Absolutely. And you see so many people who their first debut show gets incredible rave reviews. And then their sophomore slump comes. Their second show, they want to go back to Edinburgh with a brand new hour the next year. And it's just not as good because they haven't given themselves the time to really, for me, it's like just to go live your life and, get new inspirations and to really take the time to develop it. Whereas people spend years on their debut show and then they try to cram in 6 months, a whole new hour. I think, yeah, I mean, look, I might do that, so don't hold me to this, but I think it's really good to kind of take a year or two off between shows. But again, doing comedy and doing Edinburgh can be so addictive with all the adrenaline and the validation. So I see why people are like, well, I want to do this every single year, but we'll see how I go about that.
Yeah, I mean, talking to so many people, it seems the best and the worst place in the world to be. Best in terms of mixing with people who've kind of got the same kind of energy and ideas and kind of things like that. And then the worst of kind of financially and physically, it kind of ruins you as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I didn't do it last year was, as I said, I kind of had some visa issues, but which impeded me developing the show, but also just financially, I was like, I just had to pay to renew my visa. I don't have any leftover money to kind of invest in even accommodation, much less a whole production. So that's why so many people wait for their debut show, right? Like, this is how I've been feeling. I'm like, if I'm going to spend all this money to take the show to Edinburgh, I need to love the show. I'm not going up there with a show I don't feel incredibly confident about. So yeah, it's hard to find that balance.
I don't know if you wanted to kind of talk briefly about the show, how it came about and kind of, the kind of changes that you've made along the way.
Yeah, so as I said, it's sort of an expansion of this 45-minute show I did in 2023, which was called Communist Dad. And a lot of it's sort of about my childhood because I grew up with a single father and yeah, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, like in the American South, but my dad has like really leftist politics. So there's a lot of comedy to explore in that. And I kind of like I'm kind of a strange character on stage, I think. So I kind of like giving my backstory. And this show is that was sort of about my dad. This is sort of about my relationship with my estranged mother. And it's sort of which can sound kind of intense, but it's actually quite funny because last year, basically, she slid into my Instagram DMs after 30 years and a lot of comedy from that. But then I'm also talking a lot about my dating life. A lot of that inspired by my time off that I took from comedy when I had to go to Paris. Had a lot of crazy experiences, which is what I was saying earlier about you need to take time to go get some inspiration. And then kind of like drawing comical parallels between like my dating life and my family life. Yeah, and some of those sort of international dating experiences I've had.
And so kind of talking to people who do shows, it almost seems as if you're almost kind of constantly looking, you kind of think, that'll be great for the show. Are you doing that in real time almost sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone?
My friends get so annoyed with me. Luckily, a lot of my friends are comedians, but I'll be like mid conversation and I'll just like say a little phrase as a joke to them. And then I have like a little notebook I carry with me everywhere. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have to write this down. Like I write down everything because your mind just always has to be in that mindset. And for me, if I don't write something down, I'm immediately going to forget it. And that's like, I've had jokes where I used to sometimes you'll just wake up in the middle of the night with a joke idea. And then you'll think, oh, that'll be so funny when I think of it in the morning. I've lost too many good jokes that way. Though to be fair, sometimes I'll wake up and I'll have written a joke idea in the middle of the night in my notebook and I look at it and I'm like, either I don't know what that means or that's not funny. Must have been funny in a dream. But yeah, in my life, I'm always kind of looking for things like that. And actually, for me, the challenge is trying to find a boundary there and trying to decide that's why I was saying I sort of like having a show concept where I know what I'm going to talk about. Otherwise, I could be so scattered. I could be talking about how hilarious my cats are, my flatmate, my friends, my dating life. So narrowing it down kind of helps my brain calm down a little bit and focus on how to make it a show.
Looking on the ticket site at the Fringe, so yours are £9. That feels like a nice. It's not. I'm gonna say it's cheap. Cheap's the wrong word, but attractively
Cheap,
priced.
cheerful.
It's attractively priced is probably that's because it's kind of difficult, I think, with people going to shows now. I don't know whether £10 kind of feels like a kind of mental barrier where if shows are £12-15, then that's an ask, and you almost need to kind of know you're going to enjoy it before you go. Whereas I think below 10, you can just go, yeah, I like the poster, I like the vibe, I'll give it a go. I mean, do you feel that when you're kind of trying to attract an audience and kind of get people in?
Oh, it's such a difficult thing to decide. I really spend a lot of time deciding what I want to do. And mine's technically pay what you can. So I think 9 is like the asking price, but it's sort of a tiered thing. And I'm really glad I went that route because I I've been doing Brighton and my tickets there are £10 with an £8 concession. And I think that was kind of a mistake, if I'm being honest, because there's so many free shows at Brighton that you're competing with, work in progress shows that are, free from comedians who have been doing it longer than I have. And, when I was first sort of setting up my Brighton show, I was thinking to myself, well, if I'm going to be taking the train back and forth, there's a couple of nights where I'm doing 2 shows, so I'm going to stay over the night. I was like, I don't want to just pour all this money into going back and forth with Brighton, so I want to charge some for it. And I think maybe doing a cheaper or free show in Brighton is the way to go in the future. But for Edinburgh, I mean, you have to, I think, especially for a debut show, you want to invest in not just the show itself, like you might for a free Fringe show, but there's the PR aspect of it, the marketing, the poster, the accommodation, which I'm sure every comedian who's doing an Edinburgh show here complains about. But I feel like 9 is good because, my last show was a free show where you ask for donations at the end, and that's about how much people gave me anyway. So I think Fringe audiences are comedy fans. They're there to support the arts. And so in Edinburgh, they have the expectation that they're going to be giving the artists some money. And I much prefer just doing that up front instead of having to beg for it at the end. It makes me feel a little more professional and makes me feel also it's just nice knowing at the beginning of the day how many tickets you've sold and how full the room is going to be. So it's a really difficult balance to find, but I think I landed somewhere that seems like it'll serve me in the long run.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a very difficult balance to do that in that, it's not just about optimizing revenue. You kind of think about that. You want obviously as many, you've poured your heart into it. You've kind of done all this work. You want as many people as possible to see it. And so there's that balance. And like you said, probably in Brighton, maybe if you'd have taken a bit more of a loss, but you've had more people in, there's value in having more people there. And, but there's less money. It's always a very difficult.
Yeah. But, on the other hand, I will say that my Brighton audiences have been smaller than I hope that my Edinburgh audiences are. However, they have all paid £8 or £10 to be there. They are invested. They read the material. They read what the show is about. They know they've probably scoped me out on social media. They have been some of the friendliest audiences I've ever had. And, as I said, I think Brighton might be my target audience anyway. But I think a lot of it's just that when you are paying that amount, you're actually researching more who this artist is. Whereas the sort of the downside of maybe doing the free show is that anyone will come in, they'll just take a gamble on it and they might not vibe with you as much. So I'd almost rather have a smaller, friendlier audience who really likes me and my style than, and this is what I had a little bit with my free Fringe show that I did in Edinburgh 2 years ago. they weren't always necessarily the kind of person who might like my humor, but they didn't feel the need to look at it so much. So there's definitely ups and downs. And I think what I like about Pay With You Can as well is that I'll still be able to, in terms of just bodies in the room, because I actually my room in Edinburgh is quite big. So, I obviously want to do a lot of promotion to get people who are booking it in advance, but then can sort of have flyers out there, an hour before the show being like, you can just come in now. You don't have to reserve in advance and things like that. So it's always finding that balance.
And I mean, how disciplined and prepared are you for all that kind of stuff as well? So obviously you've got all the work on the show, but then you've got, yes, the whole kind of marketing and getting people in, and you probably have fewer sleepless nights if you know you've got at least, let's say, 10 people a night already booked in. Then you know that, by the time you get there, it's going to be, well sold out. A lot of people in there. But all the time you're doing that, you're not doing the show.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely the most stressful part of it. But I think sort of the benefit of the fact that I've sort of taken this time, and I feel pretty good about where the show is, and it's May. I don't need to sort of kill myself all summer trying to, stay up and edit and go and gig a lot to test out new bits. I feel pretty confident. So I do want to spend the next 2.5 months really focused on the marketing. Like I'm almost done with my poster and my flyer. I'm working with this designer on, and then, starting to just look, I want to start posting online. I don't really post that much, but not even so much that I want to go viral and build a big following, because you can't do that in 2 months. But I think, I want to start being able to maybe do some advertising and also just have some things that show my artistry, so that if someone sees my poster in Edinburgh and they check out my Instagram, they can just get a sense of my voice and the kind of humor that I have to kind of scope me out. So my plan is to have like my summer of marketing ahead of me, because I haven't started doing it loads because I've been focused so much on Brighton, but you got to start as early as you can to really build the momentum, I think.
And do you see that as being pieces to camera where you're just kind of talking about yourself, talking about the show, whatever it is, kind of thing, or clips of crowd work and that kind of stuff, or a bit of everything?
I see it mostly being kind of me. Like, I have this idea. I was at TK Maxx last weekend and they had all these ridiculous candles. So I'm making a little video where I'm just like rating the candles and kind of making fun of them. It's just like in a way that I think actually reflects my sense of humor, not just like playing into a trend or anything. Because to be honest, I don't do loads of crowd work. It's not, I'll do, especially when I'm doing a full show, I'll warm the audience up at the beginning a bit. But when I'm doing a 10-15 minute spot around London, I'm not filling that time with crowd work. I'm like, you guys are going to listen to these jokes that I have written, because I'm sort of a writer first comedian. And in terms of the jokes, I don't really want to post jokes that are going to be in the show, because then you're kind of giving away for free what you're asking people to come see. And I just saw this amazing comedian, Rory Scovel, at Soho Theater a couple of weeks ago, and there were some jokes of his that he told. And look, he's one of the funniest comedians, in my opinion, who I've ever seen live. But there were a couple of jokes where I'm like, I saw that on Instagram already on your page. So not that it wasn't as funny, but it did kind of demystify it, especially for a comedian like him, who he seems very in the moment. He seems very improv-y, but then to kind of shatter the illusion, because I've seen him say that exact thing before. I don't want to. I worry for comedians who kind of fall into the trap of posting their jokes. Now, after I do Edinburgh, I'll flush all those jokes down the toilet. I'll record them so then I can post those clips. But sort of leading up to it, I see the value of the jokes, and I want people to pay to see them, if that makes sense.
And the show itself, do you see it kind of existing, whether that's YouTube or Next Up or anywhere else like that? Are you hoping that it'll kind of live on as a kind of full show for people to see after the Fringe?
I would love that. I sort of have a plan, maybe when I come back to London after the Fringe, especially like while I'm still, because by the end of the show, like by the end of the run, you feel more confident about it than ever. Like you get so much more natural by the end of the month, like you know it like the back of your hand. Yeah, I would love to do kind of a recording of it sort of professionally, maybe upload it to YouTube, or find a partner to distribute it. But at the very least, just to be able to dice up an hour's worth of jokes for TikTok and Instagram, and be able to say, like, this is my humor, and I'm not really telling these jokes anymore. So I'm more comfortable kind of sort of offering them for free. I would really love to do that. I think it's almost like a scrapbook for your artistic career. Like I hate recording myself normally, but to me it would be so tragic to do a show and it is so ephemeral, but then to not, back like when I'm older, I won't be able to look back and remember what it all was. I want to have that sort of recording of it for myself, if not for the fans.
You saying there about being a writer, I saw that you kind of written for Cosmo and Vice. Is that kind of stuff just general, or is there a comedic side to those bits as well?
So I actually started my career. I'm sort of by profession, I've been a writer most of my career, like since I graduated. So when I was living in New York for almost 10 years and I was freelancing, I still am a contract writer, but that's when I was doing a lot of work for Vice and other publications like Cosmo, the New York Observer, Allure, and all these publications. And I was mostly kind of pursuing journalism. So there was not necessarily a comedic bent, though if you look at some of the journalism I was doing for Vice is kind of inherently funny. It's like studies about sort of goofy things and but on other times I would be, covering the Pride Festival or calling senators and asking for quotes about the news and things like that. But at the same time, I was also writing essays that I think there was try to infuse some comedy in. And I think that's kind of how I decided, oh, I would like to do comedy. I would like to pursue writing and performing that from the writing. And whereas I think a lot of people kind of start at it from more of a performer aspect. And I used to be on Twitter and like back when I always say, I feel like there was a shift on Twitter where like pre 2015, Twitter was mostly comedy. It was mostly people writing silly things where once Trump started running for president, at least in the States, Twitter became a lot more political. And even the jokes people were making would be making jokes about the news and politics. Whereas like if you look at my Twitter account from 2013, I'm just making silly jokes, like about nothing. And there were so many famous comedians now kind of got their start on Twitter. And I think through having that and a combination of some of these essays I was writing, I really felt like I got so much more satisfaction out of writing a funny tweet that got like 2,000 likes instead of like writing a well researched thing about, some political issue. And I think that says a lot about who I am as a person, but it is what drew me to comedy. And so now a lot of the writing I'm doing is not comic, it's more sort of like content. I write a lot about like green energy stuff. So it's less sexy, but it's more consistent than comedy, obviously.
And in terms of going from writing to performing, was it just, well, that's the way to get my writing out there? Or was there always something in you that kind of wanted to perform as well?
That's a really interesting question. I think that it's more the former. I sort of have a vision for my career and which is that I want to be a screenwriter. I would like to write a TV show or a movie or be in a writer's room for another show. And I think to me, I studied philosophy in undergrad, then I became kind of a journalist, then I kind of started getting interested in comedy. So then part of why I moved to London is I went to Goldsmiths, University of London, and they have this performance making master's degree that kind of is very interdisciplinary. So we had like a drag queen, we had dancers, we had me, I was more of a writer background, and you kind of learn how to craft a show and a performance. And that really helped me sort of transition from sort of behind my laptop writing things to feeling more comfortable on stage, but also having a goal as a writer of putting on a show and what that means, because it's very different than writing an essay, right? Like I don't just go on stage and do a comedy essay. I'm embodying things more. And so that was really helpful. But I still see ultimately my goal with doing stand up is still to just further my writing career. And I think performing, getting your name out there, doing fringe festivals is just a good way to kind of showcase what you're capable of in a way that just writing alone can't necessarily do, if that makes sense. It helps you garner a little bit more attention. So I do think I come at it very much from a writer's background and a writer's goal, and this is just kind of my middle ground. But I will say I do love performing. Like it's been I've always been a little extroverted, so hasn't been that much of a challenge. And I don't really get stage fright, but I think if I had to pick one, like I'd rather be a writer than an actor. You know what I mean? I can't act at all, so that's not on the table for me. But yeah, I do enjoy performing, but it's almost like as just a necessary evil almost.
And you're also part of Soho Theatre Labs. I mean, how was that as an experience?
That was really, really fun. It was the Comedy Plus Lab. So it was a group of comedians who already have some experience because Soho also has like a beginner's comedy course. So this was actually last year, and it was a great group of comedians, a lot of whom I had gigged with before, but a lot of who I hadn't. We were like laughing. It's so crazy that sometimes the circuit feels so small, like you think you know everyone. And then I'm like, oh, here's this hilarious comic who I've never been on a lineup with. And our teacher was Esther Manito, who, in addition to just being an absolutely brilliant comedian, is the warmest, loveliest person of all time. Like, I'm such a fan of her as a human being, but she also isn't afraid to give you like really good feedback, right? So, a lot of when you do a beginner's course, they're kind of teaching you how to write a joke and all of that. A lot of what this lab was kind of doing free writing and then sharing stuff, workshopping stuff. Like we would just go on stage with a microphone in front of our like 15 classmates and kind of test stuff out. And then, we would get feedback from Esther, but also the course mates. And it was really, really helpful because comedians are famously the hardest people to make laugh. They're the most difficult audience. So when I was testing out some stuff for the show in front of these people who I, respect but who are also comedians who have heard it all, when you make that group of people laugh, even though there's such a surreal aspect to like kind of pretending to be doing a gig, when you get a laugh there, it feels you makes you really confident about the joke. And I think also just seeing other people's process in how they're developing their stuff can be so inspiring of like, oh, seeing how that joke evolved is inspiring me to like maybe reapproach this joke that hasn't been working for me. And then of course the course ends with you getting to like perform on the stage at Soho in this like huge showcase, which was, obviously that's every comedian's bucket list is to perform on that stage. And hopefully it won't be my last time, but yeah, it was a great experience, and I've recommended it to a lot of my comedian friends because it's just good to have a dedicated space to go and write every week, especially when you're working on a show. And I think Soho, I don't remember exactly how much it costs, but they make it pretty accessible. It's not They could probably get away with charging twice as much as they do, and I know they have kind of bursaries and stuff for people who need help in that way, and for me, I found it a very valuable investment.
I was looking as well, you've got a lot of roast battle experience. Because I'd imagine that's quite different to like your show and those kind of things. Is it a different muscle to kind of do that kind of stuff?
It absolutely is. The tournament is going on right now. I'm doing the semifinals this Friday at the Bill Murray with James Milam. So I'm sure by the time this comes out, I'll either have won or lost. And I've done about 9 roast battles at this point, and I really, really enjoy it, mostly because I've never lost. And but to me, it's like, does it exercise a different muscle? I don't know. I think of it more like it's the training for the Olympics. It's like going to the gym and lifting weights so that then you can throw the ball further. Because I think it's sort of like when you're roasting someone, they become the writing prompt. And then you're, having to use all the same muscles, I think, of how to connect the language together so that there's a joke and all of that. And, then I can develop those skills. So then when I'm roasting myself in my show, I still have I have those skills. So to me, it's a great joke writing exercise because the idea of roasting people is not, if you see my comedy, it's not my thing necessarily. I'm more on the self-deprecating side of things, if anything, and more storytelling. And so can be a bit mortifying to go up and have to say something mean about someone. But most of my roast battles have been people I'm friends with, so we have a good time with it. And it's been really flattering. There have been a couple of times where I've written a roast joke about someone else, and they ask me after the show, they're like, can I take that joke and use it for myself? Because I could never use it. I wrote this joke about this guy. What am I going to say? Oh, I met this guy. It would be too abstract. But for someone to want it feels really nice. And it's no one takes it that seriously, but I just love, you sort of have a week, you have 10 to 20 facts about a person, what can you crank out in terms of new material? And I think a lot of times for comedians, just coming up with new material is the hardest part. You sit down at your desk with your pen and paper and it's like, well, what am I gonna, where do I begin? So it's always nice to have a starting point when writing a joke. So it's fun.
Now that makes a lot of sense. I was looking on your website as well, and very bits about bio, and then there was a section called snails, and I thought that was going to be a metaphor for something. I clicked on it. No, it's just a load of snails. Is there any reason for that?
I just love snails. I have a tattoo of a snail, and I I sort of, in a way, it is. I think there probably is a metaphor there somewhere that I haven't explored. Maybe it's that I think my persona on actually I just came up with this, but this actually is resonating with me as I think of it. I think my persona as a comedian is very kind of hardened, masculine, tomboy, American, confident. I kind of go up on stage and I'm like, "What up?" But then a lot of the topics I'm exploring are about things that are quite vulnerable. And some feedback that I've gotten on my comedy before is that people say, "Oh, it's surprisingly vulnerable. It's surprisingly easy for you to be vulnerable given your persona." And I think something that I've always loved about snails is that they have the shell and they're so proud of it and they feel so safe in it, but it's actually so fragile, right? Like you drop them and it shatters into a million pieces. So I guess I like snails because I'm fragile. It's just a long-winded way of saying that. But where I grew up, we didn't really have snails, and then I moved to LA for a couple of years and there were snails everywhere. And so I sort of fell in love with them because they felt so exotic. And then I moved here and obviously 10 times as many snails in London as anywhere I've lived. And I always go when it's kind of moist outside in the morning. I'll often go and like go down the sidewalk on my street and just like take all the ones from the sidewalk and put them back in the bushes because I'm always so afraid of like seeing all the smushed snails in the morning. So that's my charity work.
Yeah. Without wanting to kind of torture the metaphor too much, I mean, what's your stance on slugs then?
I actually love slugs, and because I meet a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I love snails, but slugs are disgusting." Now, I might have a little more hesitance picking up a slug, but I think they could be really beautiful. They don't like gross me out, and I think metaphorically, I kind of like that they're just like they're raw dogging the world. They're just like, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just like a worm. In a way, they're probably harder to crush because they're kind of like rubbery. They're probably more sturdy because they don't have this shell. I don't know. There's something metaphorical to explore there as well.
You were saying about your kind of different sides. So when you're looking to promote the show, so are you looking to fly yourself or get people in? And if you're doing it yourself, what kind of, like you said, what kind of persona will you put on when you're trying to sell the show?
I absolutely intend to pay someone else to flyer for me because I really don't like flyering. And when I did Communist Dad 2 years ago, that show, I sort of had a mix where I had someone helping me flyer, and then I was like, "Oh, and then I'll do the other half of the flyering." And I would often just be sitting outside my venue with like a stack of my flyers, just like smoking a cigarette. I don't know. I find there's something. This is why I also haven't started posting a lot of content online. Is I still have this mental barrier of, oh, it feels cringe to ask people to pay attention to me in this way to kind of promote myself. And it's something I really want to get over because I see all my peers doing it. I don't find it cringe when they're doing it for themselves. I really respect it. So I want to do that. What I have thought about doing is I have some friends who are also debuting or doing shows. And I've thought about trying to organize kind of a flyer exchange because I don't mind. I love flyering for my friends because I really believe in them. And I'm like, it's so much easier to talk about how amazing your friends are than here's why you should spend money to come see me. I don't know. I find and especially I think, to be honest, to answer your question in a different way, I think it also kind of clashes with my comedy persona in a way to sort of be asking for a favor or like for attention. Whereas I like to kind of show up kind of pretending to be cool, too cool for school. So if they've seen me in that kind of moment of promoting myself, it can clash with how I want them to perceive me when I first walk out on stage. That's my justification for not wanting to flyer. Just made it more intellectual there.
Yeah. No, it's kind of, I kind of understand it, but it is kind of weird that, you're happy to stand up in front of 100 people or however many and talk about yourself and your deepest feelings and your biggest traumas and all that kind of stuff. But to go up to someone in the street and say, would you like to see my show? That's too much.
You sound like my therapist right now, genuinely. That is something we have talked about. It's way more easy for me to be vulnerable in front of a group of strangers than in front of, like, 5 people who I kind of know. I think a lot of comedians have this. It's sort of like there's like a wall between you and the audience, so you don't really feel their presence or judgment. Or honestly, you might never see them again, but there's something about the intimacy. It's asking for help. That's how I see it, and that's what I really struggle with. Whereas when I'm on stage, I'm almost like doing an act of service for them by performing for them. So it is jarring. I think a lot of comedians have this kind of sort of ironic struggle. But I want to challenge myself to fire a little bit just for the character building aspect of it. Get over my toxic, trait there. But yeah, it's tough.
We talked about the ticket pricing. Location, I mean, how much work did you do on kind of finding the right place? Because I know sometimes it's a mix of kind of where you are, where the price is, what time, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you start with a blank piece of paper and you say, like, where would I like to perform? When would I like to perform? Did you kind of think, right, I want to be within a small radius of a certain area and those kind of things?
Location was absolutely a factor for me, and the place I ended up is a little bit further out than might have been my dream. But what was more important to me than location was the time of day. And part of that is because I will be trying to do a little bit of freelance work while I'm in Edinburgh. So I'd like to kind of have the mornings to kind of, bang out some essays and things like that. But also my show this year is kind of the same time that I did my last show. It's sort of like 3:10 in the afternoon. I think that's just a perfect time to do a show, especially when you're debuting and you're not already someone who has really been going a long time and really established, because I don't want to be competing for like prime time. At the same time, I don't want to be doing 11 a.m. when people haven't had lunch yet. I want people to feel like they can have a beer at 3 in the afternoon. And also, even just for my own mental health, like, I want to be able to go see good shows in the evening and unwind with my friends, but then also be able to sweep in a little bit, get a little work done. So, of the offers I got, I was really excited about the timing of this one. And I like that it's sort of a bigger room, because it just gives you more potential to fill it out. And it's kind of a challenge. Like, I don't expect to sell out the whole run, though. Wouldn't that be incredible? So, I mean, we're trying for it, but yeah, and Just the Tonic, who I'm with, they have so many great shows on in the building where I'm doing my show. The comedian Daniel Sloss is doing a run of a new work in progress, and I was like, how cool is that to be in the same building as him? And I also think it'll help. There'll just be a lot of foot traffic in that area, even though it's a little bit further out from like the core center, because people will be going to see his show and some of the other amazing shows happening at that venue. So I'm really pleased with where I landed.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat. Just to finish, you want to kind of talk about where people can see you and tiny bit about the show.
So my debut Edinburgh Hour is starting on the 31st of July. I'm going to be playing every day at 3:10 at Just the Tonic Nucleus in the Subatomic Room, which is on Pleasance. And the show is a very personal show. It's my debut show, and it's about kind of my unusual childhood. I was raised by a single dad in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's also about my very exciting and not at all weird dating life. And kind of the crazy year that I had last year, exiled in Paris and, dating a French guy, and then someone very mysterious sliding into my DMs. The show is called MILF, Mom I'd Like to Find, which maybe is a little bit of a spoiler about that last part. And yeah, I would love to see you guys there.
Thanks very much to Candace. You can find more about her show and where to find her in the show notes. If you enjoyed this, check out other episodes with people performing at this year's Fringe. Thanks for listening.